Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another true crime video. So the case that we're covering today was actually recommended in the comment section of the video I did on, I think it was Alexis Sharkey. And I wish I'd screenshotted the comment so that I could give whoever made the comment a shout out, but if it was you, let me know in the comments. Anyways, this commenter suggested that I watch the HBO docuseries Murder on Middle Beach. And at first, I watched it because it was recommended to me and I like watching documentaries and docuseries and true crime stuff. But I didn't plan on doing a video about the case. I just kind of watched it for fun, I guess, if that's the way I should say it, like in my free time. But believe me when I tell you, halfway through the first episode, I was hooked and I started taking notes because I knew I would have to make a video or two about the case for a few reasons. Firstly, it's still unsolved. So anytime we can raise awareness and get the word out about an unsolved murder, we should take that opportunity. Secondly, it's such a compelling case with so many suspects and theories and a really complicated yet relatable family at the center of it all. So I am hoping that it stimulates some very interesting conversations in the comment section. Today we're talking about the murder of 49-year-old Barbara Beach Hamburg. But before we talk about the case itself, I want to quickly talk about the person who ended up making this documentary, Barbara's son, Madison, who was 18 years old when his mother was killed. He began working on this as a school project 3 years after her death while he was attending Savannah College for Art and Design.
With the hopes of finding a killer, Hamburg's son, Madison, who is a filmmaker, partnered with HBO to make a documentary.
What do you think I'm looking for?
You want to know who Mom was because of the murder?
What do you think I need?
Hello, check.
Peace.
Murder on Middle Beach is showcasing Hamburg's son's journey to find his mother's killer.
One day when this comes out, the person who did this to Mom, they'll see this documentary.
We asked police about the soon-to-be released HBO series.
Through what he's putting out there, there's a piece of information that we didn't previously have. And I know he's been out doing interviews throughout town. So maybe there's that piece of information that he'll uncover, and then together we can bring this to closure.
Madison had also been struggling with a drug addiction for several years. And when his mother's life ended, he hadn't really seen or spoken to her for several weeks. So there was obviously a new layer of pain for him. He was a teenager on a bad path. He wasn't living at home at the time, and he most likely felt there had been a lot of wasted time that could have been spent with his mother while he was out chasing other pursuits. And there's a point in the third episode of the series, because there's 4 episodes altogether, where Madison breaks down and cries, saying that shortly before his mother died, he'd shown her another film project he'd been working on, which dealt with the topic of someone taking their own life. And Barbara had, teared up, like she started to cry. And she asked him, if something happens to me, do you think you'll be okay? And Madison had told her, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. So clearly there is another level of grief and regret on top of, the sadness and loss you already feel when a loved one is taken from you, especially a parent. And Madison is a guy after my own heart when it comes to telling these true crime stories, which is something that we usually call them, right? Stories. But in reality, they aren't stories at all. They are real events happening to real people. And these real events always have a ripple effect that touches not only those directly involved, but family members, friends, and the community as well. And Madison wanted to create his project with that in mind, saying, quote, "When I came back to school, it was hard to tell people what had happened to me because there is this connotation that comes with my mother being murdered. I was hoping through the film to change that, or at least take a step towards a different connotation, which is the unresolved guilt and lingering distrust and navigating all that while telling the story of a murder from a human perspective and a familial perspective," end quote. And in my opinion, Madison achieved all that and more with Murder on Middle Beach. As I watched the episodes, I found myself swinging back and forth between relating to Barbara, seeing myself in Barbara, and then seeing my own children in her children, thinking about what would happen to them if this happened to me. And her children are obviously Madison himself and his younger sister, Allie. Seeing how a young family can start off so happy, they can have it all, and then something happens, or a lot of things happen, and the innocence and unfiltered joy turns into jealousy, resentment, hurt, anger, and division. So we will start from the beginning with that young happy family who had so many years ahead of them to look forward to, and the hope for the future that really only happens when you have all those years to look forward to before life deals you blow after blow. But before we continue on with the video, let's have a word from today's sponsor, Audible. Anyone who's watched my videos for a while knows I am ride or die for Audible. I love it so much. I love to read, and in my, teens and early 20s, I used to read so many books, but life happens, kids, work, there's no time any longer, in my life at least, to just sit down in a corner and read a physical book. And I know a lot of you are in the same boat because you're lifelong learners like me, but you're also busy. You've got stuff going on in your lives that prevents you from just sitting and reading all day. Audible has been a game changer for me, not only in my personal life, but with YouTube as well, because I often use audiobooks to research cases that I cover, sometimes more than one, because you guys know I want all the details. And Audible makes it so easy for me to get my work done without taking too much time away from my life. Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, anything from bestsellers to new releases to books on history, true crime, business, motivation, and so much more. With an Audible membership, you can download titles and listen anytime, anywhere. The Audible app is free and it can be downloaded on all smartphones or tablets, and it has a lot of features that I personally really appreciate and regularly use. For instance, I can listen across multiple devices and I never lose my place. I also listen to audiobooks at night. I have always listened to audiobooks at night since I was a kid. I need something playing at night or my brain thinks too much about things that I shouldn't think about and then I can't sleep. But I don't want to obviously get too far ahead in the audiobook after I fall asleep. So the timer function in the app is amazing. I think it's actually called the sleep timer function. I can set the timer for 15 or 20 or 30 minutes and fall asleep knowing that the audiobook will stop playing when the timer goes off. There's also speed control, which comes in handy so often because certain narrators have different speeds that they talk at, and some of them speak so slowly. So I change the speed until it suits me. You can also use the clips feature to share audio excerpts from your favorite listens with anyone. And as an Audible member, you get a credit for one free audiobook a month, no matter what the price or the length. And these credits actually accumulate. They don't disappear if you don't use them for 1 or 2 months. Using this credit is so easy, so convenient, and if you end up getting an audiobook and not liking something about it for some reason, Audible will exchange it for you with no questions asked. And I've done this a few times. I mean, literally, there are no questions asked. It's awesome. Best of all, even if you decide to cancel your Audible membership, whichever audiobooks you downloaded using your credits, they're yours forever, and they remain in your Audible library in the app. They don't disappear when you're no longer a member, and that's something that's always stressed me out about, Spotify, for instance. I spend all this time creating playlists and compiling my favorite music, and if I just one day decided to stop paying for Spotify, all of that would be gone. It's not mine. So I have been working on a multi-parter for a few weeks now that has been highly requested for years, a series of videos on Bonnie and Clyde. I'm so excited to do it, and I was so pumped when I found out that Audible had the audiobook Go Down Together, the true untold story of Bonnie and Clyde. And this audiobook is by Jeff Gwynne. I love Jeff Gwynne's books so much. I listened to his audiobooks on Audible when I was putting together my series on Jim Jones, as well as when I did my series on the Manson family, and I just appreciate the level of detail he goes into when it comes to these people's backgrounds, childhoods, family dynamics. It really speaks to the way they they end up turning out and what they go on to do. So I'm currently listening to that while I put together my Bonnie and Clyde series. And if you are one of the people who's been waiting for me to cover this dynamic duo on YouTube, and if you're interested in learning more, I definitely think you should check it out, which you can do by visiting audible.com/stephanieharlowe to start listening with a 30-day Audible trial. Text Stephanie Harlowe with an E on the end of both Stephanie and Harlowe to 500-500, or go to audible.com/stephanieharlowe. I 100% support and love Audible. It's one of the things I cannot live without, and I recommend them to you wholeheartedly. Let's jump into the video. So Barbara Beach was one of 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, and she was the youngest girl. In the 3rd episode of the series, titled Sisters, Barbara's early life in Alexandria, Virginia is touched on a bit. There's a lot of great home videos included in the episode. Barbara's mother, who's also named Barbara, said that she felt it was tough having 6 kids so close together because she was always, feeling guilty that they all suffered a little neglect. And I certainly don't think she meant neglect as in, they weren't being fed or clothed. I just think she meant neglect as in, like you're one mother and you have 6 kids. So there's really not enough time for you to give any one of them undivided attention. And there's going to be times, maybe where they feel overlooked. And I think any parent who has even more than one child can attest to this feeling of guilt. But you can tell that these 6 children were very loved, and they had this great, happy, tall, handsome father who came up with fun ways to keep them busy, like filling their basketball court with water in the winter so they could ice skate on it. However, no one is perfect, and Barbara's father, Sandy Beach, was no exception. It seemed that there was and is a tendency in the Beach family to turn to alcoholism. Although Barbara's sister, Conway, says she doesn't remember their father as an alcoholic, he was, but he did desperately want to get better. And once his drinking had taken a toll on his family and his marriage, he left. He left his family to get treatment, and they don't really make it clear on if he left and kind of never came back, or if he left and then he and Barbara got divorced after that. But either way, he got better, and he became a man who had not only gotten his own demons under control, but a man who now felt it was his mission to help others recover. According to the Tampa Bay Times, Richard Sandy Beach was born in New Haven, Connecticut in 1931. He had his first alcoholic drink at a college mixer, and he found it helped him loosen up and socialize better. After graduating from Yale University, he enlisted in the Marine Corps, where he taught pilots how to land on aircraft carriers. He took his last drink on December 7th, 1964, when Barbara was just 3 years old, and he became an unpaid speaker, traveling the world and giving his wisdom and understanding at AA conferences and other sorts of speaking arrangements.
Hi everybody, my name's Sandy Beach and I'm an alcoholic. If somebody asked me to try and summarize the entire AA program in 2 words, the words I would choose is let go. And that is so counterintuitive to a person who controls their life, manages their life, thinks about nothing but their life. And it leaves us with the sensation there wouldn't be much left for me to do.
And although Sandy was able to pull himself up from rock bottom, this did not prevent the gene from being passed down to his children. His wife, Barbara Lund, claimed that all 3 of her daughters would eventually turn to alcohol, and they would in some way lose control of their lives. Conway Beach, the middle daughter, says that she also remembered her grandmother drinking alcohol heavily whenever she would come to visit. So it was definitely a pervasive thing that caused a lot of heartbreak for this family, which we will dive into as the videos go on. So in March of 1989, Barbara, the daughter, not the mother, married a man named Jeffrey Hamburg, who I swear in his younger and even his older years looks so much like Harrison Ford, but he also had that sitcom dad look, right? Tall, handsome, perfect hair, smiling, strong, and steady. And he was described by Barbara's family in the beginning as the most charismatic, the most intelligent, the most fun guy. And he was successful and well off, working as the president of Southern Electric's International Division. and eventually becoming a multi-millionaire. So Barbara had thought, I've found the one, my soulmate, my Prince Charming. He took care of her. He took her to travel the world. He literally treated her like a princess. And from what anyone could see, they were both very much in love with each other, but Barbara was head over heels for Jeff. And those years that we were talking about earlier, the ones that you get to look forward to when you're young, they were looking very bright and rosy. In 1991, Barbara gave birth to their first child, a boy they named Madison. And as the story goes, Madison was very close to his mother, who spent her days with him, playing and recording all his little baby moments, doting on him and loving him with every bit of her heart. 2 years later, in 1993, Madison's sister, Allie, was born, whose real name is also Barbara, but her middle name is Alexandra, so she prefers to be called Allie. So that's 3 Barbaras altogether at this point, the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter. But we will call Barbara's daughter Allie always, and we'll always call Barbara's mother Barb, just to make it a little easier to keep track of and not get too complicated. So Barb, in the documentary, tells Madison that he grew up with a silver spoon, and you can see what she means while watching the series. It was a picture-perfect childhood. They had money. They lived in a beautiful home in Atlanta, I believe, that they were originally living in Georgia, and then they had this summer home that was in Connecticut, which would eventually become their main home. And this house in Connecticut was, huge, and it was in a very affluent Connecticut suburb. They had nannies, they had drivers. Madison went to the best schools, anything money could buy, essentially. They had it, but it wouldn't last. In October of 1991, Jeffrey Hamburg was suddenly fired from Southern Electric after an internal review on his business dealings in Portugal allegedly revealed unethical business practices in bidding for a coal-fired power plant north of Lisbon. And this was big news. It made the papers, domestically, in the States. Everyone was talking about it. So Jeffrey Hamburg turned around and sued Southern Electric for defamation, asking for $20 million in damages. He ended up winning, but it looks like he was only awarded about $2.7 million. And after this, those who knew Jeffrey found him to be changed. After leaving Southern Electric, Jeff Hamburg started his own company called Road Track Ltd. According to a 1997 article in the Chicago Tribune, Road Track was an Atlanta-based company that beamed signals from various satellites to locate a vehicle using triangulation technology developed by the United States Defense Department. This article also says the company was created in 1995 by Jeffrey Hamburg and would cost customers $1,000 to install and $20 a month to use. Now, I can't say for sure what happened with this company, and due to certain things I found online, like patent dates and dissolution dates, etc., I have some speculations, but they would be just that, and I'm not trying to get sued. But what I can say is that when he first started this company, Jeff invited one of his wife Barbara's brothers, Richard Beach, to get in on the ground floor and work with him at Road Track. And it was shortly after he agreed to jump on board that Richard noticed certain things just didn't add up. Richard said in the documentary, quote, "He would give me stories. We were trying to get people to invest money, and crazy stories like put $1 million in and 6 months later we'd have $10 million out and we'd all be making a ton of money, and I just didn't understand it. I made the decision that if it doesn't sound right, it's probably not right." End quote. Now, Richard claims that he sort of voiced his concerns to Jeffrey and questioned things, and from that moment on, he was pretty much out. One day when Jeffrey was out of the country, he called Richard up and he was like, "Sorry, man, it's just not working out. You're not working for me anymore. Bye." So after getting fired from Southern Electric and kind of, starting his own businesses and things, not only did Jeffrey Hamburg appear to be more, sketchy in general, but he just wasn't around anymore. Family members would visit Barbara, and she was always alone. Jeff would go and travel for work or whatever, and he just wouldn't come back. He essentially abandoned her, and she was left feeling like a single mother. So she finally made the difficult decision to file for divorce. And this kind of seems strange because they lived in Atlanta, so the divorce went through in Atlanta in 2002, but it was made official in Connecticut in 2005. But this was not an easy, let's part ways and try to keep it civil sort of separation. In court paperwork that I read, it appears that once they went their separate ways, Jeffrey had agreed in court to pay alimony, child support, and also to put money into education accounts for both Madison and Allie, his kids. So this first document that I examined is Hamburg V Hamburg, decided March 6th of 2009 by the Connecticut Superior Court Judicial System of New Haven. Now, it states that the parties, who in this case were Barbara and Jeffrey Hamburg, appeared before the court on December 24th, 2008, January 14th, 2009, and again on February 2nd, 2009, for evidentiary hearings during which both parties testified and offered exhibits into evidence. So we have the plaintiff's motion for contempt, and the plaintiff in this case was Barbara Hamburg. So this document says that a final judgment and decree of divorce was entered on September 5th, 2002 in the state of Georgia and was filed in the New Haven court as a foreign matrimonial on April 5th, 2005. And from what I can tell, a foreign matrimonial means in this case you got divorced in Georgia and you'd made agreements with each other legally in Georgia, but now you live in a different state and you have to now honor the agreements made in Georgia in this new state now. That's what I got from it, but if there's any lawyers or law experts out there watching, let me know if I'm right or wrong. Anyways, now Barbara was claiming that Jeffrey was not obeying the original court order from Georgia, and he'd failed to make child support payments for his two minor children. And the amount he was supposed to pay was $2,000 a month, $1,000 for each child. And he hadn't been making these payments since September 1st, 2008. Jeffrey responded to this and said he wasn't making the child support payments because instead he and Barbara had agreed that he would pay her share of the mortgage on their marital home. But Barbara claims that this had not been a long-term agreement. They had agreed that the child support should go towards the mortgage just 1 month, which was April of 2007. And Jeffrey was unable to provide any proof or documentation that showed he and Barbara had come to a mutual understanding that this would be the case for any other month. In fact, the court found that Jeffrey had not been paying child support since April of 2007, and they found in Barbara's favor, ordering him to pay $32,000 in back child support. There's also proof that Jeffrey submitted in court an email from Barbara dated April 27th, 2007, telling him to take her share of the mortgage payment out of the child support, but even so, it appears that the mortgage was still not getting paid, and the house went into foreclosure in September of 2007. Ultimately, that foreclosure was withdrawn, and the house was sold in October of 2007. So the court told Jeffrey Hamburg he had to pay Barbara $16,000 on or before March 31st, 2009, and then $1,000 additional a month on top of the $2,000 that he was already paying for child support until his back support was up to date. And the court pointed out the fact that Jeffrey Hamburg was able to pay this since he was making $136,000 a year in income. Well, then Jeff filed his own motion of contempt against Barbara, claiming she'd failed to pay reimbursed medical expenses and her half of the mortgage, as well as other expenses related to the sale of their home. But the court claimed that Jeffrey provided no proof of this, so his motion was denied. Next, Jeffrey Hamburg filed a motion for modification of the child support, claiming his financial situation had changed for the worst. Now, apparently, according to the Hartford Courant, Jeffrey had been employed in recent years and he was living in New York City, but he claimed that he hadn't been getting paid as much, as far as a salary goes, and instead his employer or the business he was working for was sort of taking care of his living expenses, such as the Fifth Avenue apartment he was living in, as well as sending him on overseas trips. Well, the court found, despite Jeff's sworn financial affidavit that his income had decreased, that the evidence presented at the hearing actually showed that his income had increased. Therefore, he failed to prove a substantial change of income that would allow his child support payments to be lowered. It says that Jeffrey's own testimony revealed that he was earning approximately $110,000 to $115,000 a year, and he'd actually received a $25,000 bonus in 2008. So it just didn't work out for him. So at this point, both of Jeffrey Hamburg's motions have been denied, and he has to pay, this pretty big sum of money, $16,000, and his child support is actually going up $1,000 a month until he gets his back support paid, and he's probably not too happy about it. And then Barbara files another motion for contempt, claiming that her ex-husband Jeff hasn't been paying educational and medical expenses for their children, which he was allegedly supposed to do. Now, the court couldn't find any proof or evidence that they'd agreed that he was going to do this. So they referred this matter to family relations for mediation, hoping that Barbara and Jeffrey could come to an agreement regarding their children's health and education. And if they could not reach an agreement, it would go to arbitration. So I suppose this was a small win for Jeffrey, but overall, he's probably pissed, right? Allegedly. Okay, so now I'm moving on to Hamburg V Hamburg, dated June 5th, 2018, heard by the Connecticut Court of Appeals. And this tells us the outcome of the mediation with family relations. Apparently, Jeffrey and Barbara had agreed that they would each have separate education accounts. I believe they're called custodial accounts for their children, but the money in these accounts could only be used for the educational expenses of the children. Jeffrey would not be allowed to utilize the accounts to fulfill his child support obligation or to, use it personally for himself. And each party would have to provide a copy of statements for all custodial accounts that they were in charge of to the other person. So I can show you that I'm putting money in like I'm supposed to be, and I can show you that I'm not taking money out like I'm not supposed to be. On May 14th, 2009, Jeffrey was ordered to provide 7 years' worth of bank statements for the custodial accounts that were in his name, but he didn't. So the following month, he was found in contempt of court orders, not only for failing to produce the statements, but also for, once again, failing to pay child support, both current and back. During a hearing on June 4th, 2009, the judge heard evidence that in 2005, there had been $150,000 in the account of each child, Madison and Allie's accounts. And on the date of this hearing, Jeffrey testified that only $10,500 remained in Madison's account and only $23,000 was left in Allie's. Jeffrey also admitted that he had used these funds for his own use, and he was again found in contempt and ordered to be incarcerated until he paid $8,000 to purge the contempt. On December 23rd, 2009, Jeffrey appeared in court again, and he was again ordered to make payments on the back child support, according to a court-ordered schedule. And he'd also be required to return to court periodically from time to time so they could monitor his compliance with his new order, make sure he was doing what he's supposed to be doing, because clearly he has a problem doing what he's supposed to be doing. Jeffrey Hamburg invoked his right to remain silent at this time on the subject of his children's education funds, because his lawyer was probably like, why did you admit before to having drained your kids' education accounts, which you weren't supposed to do, and then using the money for yourself? Why would you admit to that? So you're just going to remain silent from now on. That's just my opinion on what happened, but I expect that is exactly what happened. And when Jeffrey returned to court the following February, he chose to remain silent again. However, the court did find that Jeffrey still had the means to pay the money he was not paying. And they found him in contempt again, willful contempt this time, which sounds so much more serious. And I want to point out, in September of 2010, Jeffrey Hamburg was arrested by Madison police on a charge of first-degree larceny for stealing money from his daughter Allie's education account. He was put in jail, and he posted a $50,000 bail.
This morning, Hamburg was arrested and charged with first-degree larceny.
It has to do with a custodial account where he was withdrawing money from it.
According to the affidavit, Hamburg's daughter, named after her mother, Barbara Hamburg, filed a complaint about depleted funds held in her custodial account, $84,000 to be exact. It was to be used solely for her education. In June 2010, when Jeffrey Hamburg appeared in court, he was at least $1 million in debt. The judge told him to get a job and pay back the money.
I think he's working. I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that, this whole trauma of being a suspect in the death of his wife beginning in March of 2010 has been extremely traumatic for him and extremely expensive. So it does not surprise me that he's short of funds.
Hamburg was released on a $50,000 cash bond.
That $50,000 struck me as being unusually high for a larceny case.
He also said he hoped it wasn't retaliation or, quote, sour grapes over the fact they couldn't pin a murder on Hamburg.
So, I mean, he clearly had money at this point. If he had $5,000 to use to post bail to get him out of jail for not paying child support, if he had $8,000 to pay to purge the contempt, but he didn't have this money to actually pay his court-ordered child support. But that's just my opinion, and the court's as well. So at this point, we're talking about a lot of money on the line, right? Money drained from the kids' accounts, money owed for years of non-payment of child support. They give a little list of what Jeffrey owed Barbara in these legal documents, and it is as follows. $324,000 plus 4% interest per year until paid in full, $30,000 in back child support, $30,000 in attorney fees and court costs, $25,000 towards unreimbursed medical expenses and health-related expenses, $25,000 towards Madison's tuition, which would be due the following January 2010. $41,000 for educational expenses that Barbara had paid for, but Jeffrey was responsible for paying her back for. And it pretty much says that even if Jeffrey were to declare bankruptcy, it wouldn't matter. He'd still have to pay this. So the next time they were due back in court was March 3rd, 2010. And Barbara's lawyer, Richard Callahan, said in the documentary that Jeffrey had been ordered and had promised to make certain payments on this date. And he would either show up with the money on March 3rd, or Callahan would be asking the court to once again find him in contempt of court orders. And he would also be asking for him to be incarcerated until he paid the money. But Callahan, Barbara's lawyer, never got the chance to do this because although Jeffrey and his lawyer showed up to the court and Richard Callahan showed up to the courthouse in New Haven, Barbara never did. She would be brutally murdered that morning. So let's go to that morning, March 3rd, 2010. At this time, Madison was not living at home because remember, he's struggling with drug addiction, but he was also 18 at this time. So I believe he was already attending college, hence the tuition that was due for him the previous January. Allie was living with her mother at a rented house at 44 Middle Beach Road in Madison, Connecticut. Now, Allie would have been 16 years old at this time and still attending high school. But another layer to this whole situation was Allie's relationship with her mother at the time. In the documentary, Madison and Allie talk about their parents' relationship and, their own relationships with each other and their parents. Both Madison and Allie described their father, Jeff, as very controlling. This word popped up a lot from multiple people, but especially from his own kids. Controlling, manipulative, and selfish. Allie said she remembered her parents fighting a lot, constantly screaming in the house at each other to the point where she believes it scarred her. And to this day, when people raise their voices or yell at each other, it triggers something in her and she feels very uncomfortable. And this is actually quite common. Children who witness their parents fighting a lot, especially when it turns to screaming matches and insults being hurled, they can suffer long-term mental health effects. In 2012, a study published in the journal Child Development showed that kindergartners who had parents that fought meanly and frequently were more likely to experience depression, anxiety, and behavioral issues by the time they were in 7th grade. These children had more difficulty regulating their emotions and their attention, and children such as this may also have trouble maintaining healthy relationships as adults. They can develop eating disorders and other physical representations of the stress that they're under, such as health problems. Add to that one or more very controlling parents like Jeff Hamburg, and it is a recipe for disaster. Allie remembered in the documentary that their parents told them on Christmas Eve that they were getting divorced. And she doesn't clarify what year this was, but that's a pretty shitty time to let your kids know that their world's about to completely change, whether they're 8 or 18. It's still nothing that, kids want to hear at any time of the year, much less on Christmas. That's just my opinion, but I personally would have probably waited or, done it before or after this. I don't know. But Allie remembered afterwards being in her room with her mother, who was crying. And Barbara looked at her and told her, quote, "Don't ever depend on a man." And I think that this is a very normal realization that a lot of women come to on the verge of a separation or a divorce. In the podcast that I co-host, Crime Weekly, with Derek Levasseur, we recently just covered the Jennifer Dulos case. And I noted that Jennifer Dulos' situation was a lot different than most women in her shoes. It's pretty typical when you get married as a woman and you begin having children that you would pull back from your career or your job, at least at first, so you can be with the kids more, raise them, especially if your husband is making a crap ton of money like Jeffrey Hamburg was. You feel safe, at that point, being in love, feeling that someone is protecting you and will do so at all costs. And you don't feel that it's as necessary, right, to make your own money. And you'd prefer sometimes to stay home and raise the kids. But then when something goes wrong, you find yourself between a rock and a hard place. Now suddenly, you have no job experience, no money of your own. And this can sometimes cause a lot of women to stay in unhealthy relationships because they don't know how they will survive outside of it. You've been taking care of the kids in the household for years, making sure everyone's fed and dressed, that school projects are completed, that sports practices are attended, etc., while your husband was out in the world, yes, being the main breadwinner, which is great, but also rising through the ranks in his career, gaining valuable experience and connections in the professional world. And when you leave him or he leaves you, he can just refuse to support you, like Jeff Hamburg seems to have done. And there's not really much you can do about it besides endless court dates and endless legal fees and endless stress. Now, Allie did describe her mother, Barbara, as loving, warm, a great mom, but she had the tendency to drink. Barbara was an alcoholic, like her father, like her grandmother, and like her sister Conway, who we will talk about in more detail soon. Allie remembered that Barbara always had a cup of water with her that she was constantly drinking out of. And one day, Allie took a sip from this cup and discovered that it wasn't water at all. It was pure vodka. Now, for a time, Madison remained with his mother after the divorce, but Allie went to live with Jeff at some points, and she thinks that this is because he manipulated her in a way and tried to turn her against her mother. As a child, it was confusing to her. Now, the timeline is a little unclear, but at some point after the divorce, Allie was either living with Jeff full-time or staying with him quite a bit. And according to Jill Platt, who is Allie and Madison's great aunt, Jeff Hamburg was the worst. As soon as Allie got home from school, he would make her work on her homework for hours. And when she was done, he would review it, find what she'd missed or done wrong, and then make her redo it. So she'd be doing homework for up to 6 hours a day after school. And she had no real life outside of that, no sports or social clubs or social life. And Jeff felt at times that Allie was trying to shut him out. So he would take the door off her bedroom, basically giving her no privacy whatsoever. Now, when Allie was in the 7th grade, she got very sick and she had to be hospitalized. Her thyroids were bulging out of her neck, so she couldn't eat. She says, she forgot how to walk. She was very tired, very weak, and she was in a hospital bed for a month and a half. Now, it turned out that she was diagnosed with Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune disorder that causes an overactive thyroid. Allie says that the doctors told her some of her symptoms were as a result of this condition, but some of them were mental due to stress and anxiety. And in the documentary, Madison called his father and they talked about Allie. And Jeff claimed that Allie was also diagnosed with a borderline personality disorder. And he claimed that this was the reason why she would swing back and forth between loving him and hating him, and then loving her mom and hating her mom. But Jeff also claimed that Barbara was not very nice to Allie during this time while she was, going through so much stress. He alleged in the documentary that Barbara was verbally abusive to Allie. She slapped Allie and even pushed her down the stairs once. Now, it's worth noting that, as far as I can tell, Allie herself has never confirmed or denied these things. So it's very possible that they never happened. Also, as far as I can tell, it's never actually been confirmed whether or not Allie was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder on top of Graves' disease. So once again, I don't want to assume that what Jeff is saying is true, because we have to understand that almost everyone in this case at this point is a suspect. And he's talking about his dead wife. So after Allie was released from the hospital, she stayed with Jeff for a little while, during which he claims he took care of her and he got her better. Now, Allie attributes her positive change to becoming more physically active, getting outside, running, swimming, biking. But apparently, during this time, Jeff told Allie that her mother, Barbara, was considering checking her into a mental hospital, and this really pissed Allie off, and it made her angry towards her mother, to the point where she didn't even, want to talk to her. However, life with Jeff was no walk in the park either, and Allie admits that Barbara was the more lenient parent, and after the constant control and lack of privacy, eventually Allie called her mother up one day and asked, can I move back in with you? But at this time, according to Conway Beach, Barbara's sister, who was also living with Barbara at this time after having brain surgery, Allie was still fighting a lot of demons. Conway said Allie was constantly drinking, doing drugs, being promiscuous. Conway said every morning she would wake up to Allie screaming at her mother, telling her to F off. And when Conway suggested to Allie, maybe you shouldn't speak to your mother like that, Allie told her to F off too. That was her mother, and she would talk to her any effing way she wanted to. Conway believed that because her sister Barbara had already lost Allie once, she was terrified of it happening again. And she maybe sort of turned a blind eye to this behavior, becoming more of a friend to Allie than a mother, not being strict in times when she should have probably been laying down the law. And Allie, knowing this, took advantage and walked all over Barbara. So on the morning of Barbara's murder, Allie claims she was running late to school. She had to wake Barbara up to drive her into school, which Barbara did, still dressed in her pajamas. On the way to school, they stopped at a coffee shop called Willoughby's, located on Boston Post Road. And Allie got a chai latte, which she really liked at the time. Who doesn't? They're delicious. But after this, Barbara dropped her off at school and then planned to return home. According to school records, Allie was checked in by her mother at 7:54 a.m. and she was marked tardy. Now remember, this same day, Barbara is due in court at 9:30 a.m. So she should be going back home to get dressed and get ready for court, but there's a little confusion here. A friend of Barbara's named Nancy said that she'd spoken to Barbara late on the evening of March 2nd, which was a Tuesday, the night before court. And during this conversation, Barbara mentioned that she had court the next day, but not at 9:30, at 2 p.m. And Barbara said she thought this was strange because court would usually be in the morning, and this day it wasn't. Later, on the day of March 3rd, after Barbara's body was found, her sister Conway would also tell police that Barbara had told her she needed to be at court at 2 p.m. that day, and this is noted in the police files. So, for some reason, Barbara was under the impression that court was not at 9:30 that morning, but at 2 in the afternoon. And as we know, this was never true, since her lawyer, her ex-husband, and his lawyer were all waiting for her outside the courthouse at 9 a.m. that morning, and she never showed. And this will become very important later. So once Allie was at school, she decided she didn't want to be at school anymore. And she claims this was pretty common for her in those days. She didn't want to go to school. And whenever she did go to school, she wanted to leave. So she was always trying to get out of going and trying to get home from school if she was there. So at this point in the morning, she started texting and calling her mother to come pick her up, but she was getting no responses. So she called her aunt, Conway Beach, to come and pick her up from school, which Conway did. And school records show that Allie was dismissed early at 10:50 a.m. Conway picked Allie up and they drove to 44 Middle Beach Road. And the first thing Conway noticed when they pulled in was that Barbara's car was in the driveway, which she thought was strange because both she and Allie had assumed Barbara wasn't home since she wasn't answering calls or texts. As they began walking up towards the house, they noticed several things that were out of place. There was this statue of a dog that was always by the front door, and this statue had been knocked over and was broken. There was also a coffee cup on the front stoop, dropped and left there. And as they got closer, they saw Barbara's purse and keys laying in the front lawn. The purse was closest to the street. The keys were closer to the front door. According to Conway, as she knelt down to pick up her sister's purse, Allie yelled at her and said, "Don't touch anything. This is a crime scene." And Conway remembered thinking, what's this girl talking about? A crime scene? It's just like a purse and some keys in the yard. There's not a speck of blood anywhere. What a strange thing to say. And she did pick up the purse anyways. So they go inside the house. They begin calling Barbara's name, but she doesn't answer. So they go out through the back door into the backyard, and Conway notices cushions that would normally be on the seats of patio furniture, sort of stacked up next to each other. So Conway pulled one of the cushions back, obviously, feeling ominous, feeling scared, and she breathed a sigh of relief. She says that she saw blood and matted fur and assumed that it was an animal. But then as she began peeling the rest of the cushions back, she realized it was not an animal, but the beaten and bloody body of her sister, Barbara Hamburg. Barbara had not just been killed. She'd been violently attacked. Her cause of death was given as multiple blunt and sharp force injuries all over her body. Her carotid artery had been stabbed 18 times. Right off the bat, to me, this doesn't seem like the crime of a stranger. This was personal and fueled by strong negative emotions. It has been assumed that the murder weapons were most likely a hammer and a knife, but that has yet to be confirmed. Barbara's purse wasn't taken. Nothing was taken. Someone went to that house specifically to murder Barbara, and they did so in the most vicious and violent way possible. I repeat, in my opinion, this was personal. Now, Conway and Allie called 911 to report this.
Yes. Okay, what's wrong with your sister?
A 911 call to send chills down your spine.
She has no pulse. She's bleeding. She was covered with Oh, please just come get her.
A woman who is believed to be Barbara Hamburg's sister calls for help, saying she just picked up Hamburg's daughter from school and made the discovery.
She didn't answer all day today.
She told the operator Hamburg was covered with cushions from the backyard.
I don't want to move her because I think this was not an accident.
This was a scene from when police responded to what turned into a homicide investigation in Madison 10 years ago. Barbara Hamburg was 48 years old when she was found dead on her front lawn. Eyewitness News is learning new information that was never released until our interview today with Madison Police Captain Joseph Race.
Barbara was discovered by family members. That's where the 911 came in. For the crime scene, it was outside the home, and she was attacked and stabbed.
Her secluded Madison home on Middle Beach West overlooks Madison Beach near the country club.
So it's pretty far back. They're a little bit off the road. It's one of those houses you wouldn't even have known were there unless you had a reason to go down there.
And according to Conway, while they were on the phone with the 911 operator, Allie said, "I can fix this," and attempted to perform CPR on her mother's body, getting quite a bit of blood on herself in the process. Now, on March 5th, 2010, the Madison Police Department gave a press conference saying, they're continuing to look into this death. They're continuing their investigation, but they were also looking for Jeffrey Hamburg just to talk to him, nothing else, because apparently Jeff Hamburg had dropped off the map and couldn't be found.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome for coming tonight to the Madison Police Department. My name is Chief Jack Drum, and this is Sergeant Jonathan Pardo, who's our PIO officer for the department. Madison Police Department, the Connecticut State Police, and the Office of the Chief State's Attorney of New Haven County, we're continuing our investigation into the death of Barbara Hamburg from Middle Beach Road West in Madison. At this time, we're seeking to locate her former husband, Jeffrey Hamburg, date of birth 8/5/48. He's a white male, 6 feet tall with hazel eyes. Last known address is in West Hartford, Connecticut, Timberwood Road. I want to stress that we're seeking to speak with him only in regards to this incident. And I really want to make that point clear. Just wanted for questioning.
Now I know, we're all thinking it was the husband. He had the motive for sure. considering that very day he would be going into a courtroom, and if he didn't have a crap ton of money, he was going to be put behind bars again. But that is what's really compelling about this case, because if we look past the standard, it was the husband assumption, and look deeper into Barbara's life, who she knew, what she had going on, a number of other possibilities present themselves. And I'm not saying that it wasn't the husband at all. I'm not saying that at all. This is an unsolved case. We don't know who committed this murder. And it's a theory that we will dive into in the next video, along with all the others. But the whole situation becomes more strange and convoluted the deeper you go. And I really think that we should examine every theory from every angle, because, it would be easy to say it's the husband. And I mean, even at the end of looking at every other possibility, every other scenario, every other situation, we might still think it's the husband. And then that's fine if we've looked at every other theory and every other possibility first. If at the end of that, we all want to get together and universally say we still think it's Jeff Hamburg, I think we can do that because we're just speculating. We're just saying we think that. We're not accusing anyone of anything. But in the next video, we'll be going over all the theories. And I tell you, it gets crazy. It gets dark. There's so much more to this case than you would think from the outside, and I think it speaks to humans in general. Like, you look at somebody on Facebook or Instagram, and you think you have an understanding of who this person is based on what they show you. But you don't have any understanding. You don't even have any clue, really, of what's truly underneath, of everything that they're into or everything that they're involved in, everything that they feel or think. And it just really speaks to the complexity of each and every human and how they are so much more than they seem. Sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. But that's where we'll pick up in the next video. I think this is going to be the last video before Christmas. I hate to leave you on a cliffhanger, but that was not really my intention. But obviously, I do need to spend Christmas with my family. But I will make sure to have the second part of this up ASAP after Christmas so that we can reconnect. But if I don't talk to any of you until then, happy holidays. Whatever you celebrate, whoever you're spending it with, have the very, very best one. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter. Make sure to follow my podcast, Crime Weekly. The link to the website's in the description box, so you can actually go there and click on whatever podcast platform you use. And the last case we covered is the Jennifer Dulos case, and I believe part 2 of that comes out this coming Friday. So probably right around when this video is going to post, although I have no time or concept of days anymore. I don't even know what. I know it's a weekend today, but I don't know anything other than that. So this video will probably be out before part 2 of Jennifer Dulos goes up, but you can go watch part 1 now. You can watch the first episode, which was about the Watts murders. You can also get ready and subscribe so that you're there when part 2 of the Dulos case comes out. So follow me on there. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter. I already said that. Stay kind, stay beautiful. Happy holidays, and I'll see you really soon. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood on the strings.